Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. If you're new here or just if you've forgotten, hi, my name is Becca. I am your favourite cripple, one-legged bad bitch amputee, and this podcast is basically just like a verbal diary, to be honest. I am trying something a bit new today. I'm using some natural lighting, me the vampire natural lighting, I know, but although it is cold in Scotland, it is a really nice day today, and when I recorded the last episode, I ended up getting such a sore head from the lights, and I've woke up this morning with a bit of a sore head, so I'm trying to reduce that. Hopefully the lighting is okay. Feel like it's looking alright on camera, so if you're watching on YouTube, let me know. Do I look like shit? Maybe don't be that harsh. Don't know if my brain did right now. But anyway, pardon me. I am not somebody who is able to just turn the camera on and record. I need to do planning unless it is something that I am very passionate about, and that is usually some kind of experience that I've had where I feel like right now I need to sit down and record because all this is coming out and it's authentic. But a lot of the time I need to kind of have at least a list of the things I want to cover, because if you have watched the other 30 episodes of the podcast, you will realise that I can go off on tangents and get sidetracked very easily, so sometimes I just need something in front of me to reel myself back in. But anyway, on today's episode, I wanted to take a little break from what I usually do, and this episode is going to be a little bit different, but I think it's something that it will make its way into my podcast rotation in the way that I record things. From the title and the thumbnail, you might have guessed that today's episode is going to be about a different variation of poetry that I love. Some people may not know, but in 2018, bit of the shake of the camera there. Some people may not know that in 2018 I put all of my poetry together that I had written into a book, and initially this was just for me, but with printing and it ended up being cheaper, I got 10 to 20 books made. So I made a book for some friends and family and I gave it to them for Christmas. Looking back, the content of the book, I realised how unhinged that actually is, and it does make sense to me because I've never really been properly able to verbalise my feelings into words and say it to people, so I'd wrote poetry that got it out all over the years, and if I was going to let my family know what I had experienced, then surprise, here's a book of my trauma for Christmas. Bit wild, I know, but that's just how my brain worked at the time. So, yes, this is my poetry book. It is called Trauma, Heartbreak and Healing. If you want to read it, you will not find this anywhere online because I initially listed it on my own website because I kind of wanted to be in control of who was buying it. There was a few people that I was like, oh, I don't know if I want them to be able to see these poems, but because at that time I was scared of what the repercussions might be and blah blah blah. Anyway, I posted some of these books on Facebook when I got the copies, and there was a lot of people saying that they wanted to read the things that I had written. So I think overall I maybe printed 40 books in total. I have 3 left, and I guess today I am going to come back to my book at the end of the podcast, but if anybody is interested in reading my poetry book, I have a lot of poetry that I have then written since 2018, and it is becoming time where I'm starting to think about doing a second book. So if you would like to see that, and you would also like Trauma, Heartbreak and Healing to be available once I do a second book, let me know, because I think maybe that's a bit of a thing that I need, is a bit of drive from other people saying, bitch, you're a good author, we'd buy it. Maybe that is just the validation that I need for myself. But anyway, I've went on a bit of a tangent. I wasn't meant to say that much about my own book here in the introduction because, like I said, I am going to come back to it later. But I also have some poetry from some of my other favourite authors, such as Amanda Lovelace and Madisen Kuhn. A lot of the poetry I also see and love is from social media, so I want to have a little section about poetry that I have found on social media and how these poems speak to me or have spoken to me in the past. I think it's really important to be able to let your feelings out, and for me, writing always felt better than speaking, and kind of a bit like saying that I need a plan, I need an idea of, even when I'm doing a podcast and I'm yapping away, I've still got something in front of me because I wouldn't be able to function without it, and that's just the way that my brain works. But as well, me writing and finding that outlet is a big part of what keeps me alive today, and I guess that's why I wanted to do this episode, really. So get yourself comfortable, hit subscribe if you're watching me on YouTube, if you would like to see more from me. If you enjoy the podcast, give the video a like it on audio platforms, subscribe to me so that you get notifications when the podcast is coming out, because I'm starting to get back on track, and I really hope I mean it when I say it this time, that Becca's back, bitch, but I'm starting to feel it, so here's hoping. It's getting to a bit of a tricky time of the year, but I'm really hoping that this podcast and the other skills that I've brought into play really kind of help me through the end of the year this year. So let's kind of see how it goes. I guess you'll know from the podcast if I'm here, if I'm not, how I'm doing. But anyway, I am going to get into this week's episode. Bit of a shameless plug like I do at the start of every episode. If you want to see some shorter clips from the podcast, if you would like to see some just normal lifestyle things, some pretty photos, whatever, follow me on Instagram at Cripple Chronicles Pod and on TikTok at Cripple Chronicles Pod. And if you liked anything from this episode, if you have your own poetry you'd like to share with me, if you have poetry that you love that you would like to share with me, send me an email to cripplecchroniclespod@gmail.com, and let's get right into this because I'm already like 10 minutes in, and a bit like the mental health medication episode, poetry is something that I really love, which is a reason why I'm doing this episode, and I have so much energy towards it because it just makes me feel happy, and it also makes me feel happy to be sharing it with you. So yeah, I hope you enjoy this week's episode. If you do, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy. The Princess Saves Herself in this one by Amanda Lovelace. This is a poetry book that really helped me when I felt so alone, still living with my mum and not being quite sure what was going on in life. The poems in this book made me feel less alone. It made me realise that I'm not the only child that has had their girlhood stolen from them by abuse, and I think that's the reason why I love poetry so much. It is a world where I don't feel alone. It's a world where people write down their deepest, darkest fears and they turn it into something beautiful. It is a reminder that beautiful things can grow from horrible circumstances, and at that time I really needed that. I really needed to know that I wasn't alone, and this theme is definitely going to carry on in the next section where I read some of my favourite poems that I have found across social media. But for now, I am going to get into reading some beautiful poetry from The Princess Saves Her one. Some beautiful poetry by Amanda Lovelace in The Princess Saves Herself in this one. The first poem that I have picked is The Queen Scored Out. My mother smiled as she offered me a cube of sugar in her upturned palm. Greedily, I accepted. I reached inside my mouth, delicately placing one, just one, on the centre of my tongue, and I clamped down. Salt. That is what abuse is. Knowing that you are going to get salt, but still hoping for sugar for 19 years. You may be gone, but I still have a stomachache. When I read this initially, I think it didn't quite sink in the significance of it, and I can understand it a lot better with the processing that I have done about my very early experiences and the amount of abuse that I sustained. There was a lot of times where it came to my parents and I would hope for something different. I would hope to be seen and heard when I would write letters to my mum about being an alcoholic. I would hope that when there had been some change in atmosphere in the house, that maybe things wouldn't be as awful as they had been. Each time my mum and my stepdad would fight, I would really hope that he would be gone, that I would get my mum back. But realistically, that hope grew smaller and smaller, and although it was still there, I knew in my heart that it wasn't going to be. I was hoping for sugar and I still got salt until I walked away. And that taste is still a very bitter taste in my mouth because I wished for better. I wished that they seen me as deserving better. And for a long time I didn't see myself as deserving better, but I do now, and that's a lot of processing, a lot of acceptance to unlearn and relearn and go through this process. The second poem that I picked out is: You should never love anything more than you love your own children. You should never love anyone more than you love your own children. How could you? I thought this poem fitted in really well after the last one. There is a poem in my poetry book that I feel kind of took inspiration from Amanda Lovelace. I have always had a love for short poems that are straight to the point. There is no need for flowery language to be able to get the point across that is trying to be made. As a kid, a teen, and early into my adult years, this is something that I wanted to scream from the rooftops and hope that maybe my mum would hear me and realise that our kids were more important than her romantic relationship. But unfortunately, she is broken, and love from a man is more important than love from her children. And although that I hate that there are so many times where I want my mum, I'm starting to recognise the want that I have is not for the person who my mum is. Maybe it was at one point, but I've had a lot of conversations with people where it does make me sad that I see my mum as a shell of herself, as a shell of who she was before she got into an abusive relationship and she lost all of her connections. And it's a really hard fight with myself to not have that relationship because I think people don't understand family estrangement and the fact that I would love to have a relationship with my mum, but I know for myself and for my own sanity and for my own mental well-being, I can't do that, and sometimes that's fucking heartbreaking because all you want is a parent to hug you and tell you that it's going to be okay. And no matter how many parental figures you have in your life, it doesn't quite fill that hole. And I wish so badly that I could choose her, but how could I when she never chose me? How could I abandon myself like that? I can't. Oh, Wow, this is getting deep. Poem 3. I think you're maybe starting to see a bit of a theme here, but this one is a little bit different. If a house does not automatically make a home, then a body doesn't automatically make a home either. I've always felt like a stranger in my skin. And the reason that I picked this poem is when I read it at first, I felt it all the way to my soul. At that time, my house didn't really feel like home, and no house really felt like home until I moved in here, and that was 2.5 years ago. And although I am living somewhere that is a bit fucking crazy at times and I haven't always felt safe, it's mine. And I feel like I've never really had that, although I've been living on my own for 8 years at this point. The house that I was in before was my grandparents and owned by my dad, and although I did make some things my own when I first moved in, there was a lot of work that was consistently getting done for my dad to move back in or to sell the house. And especially after I had my accident, I thought my dad was moving back into that house. So there were things from his house, a lot of photos of me in school uniform, me when I was younger, me at some of the most traumatic points in my life, and I hated looking at them. I hated knowing that that wasn't my choice, and it no longer really felt like my home. I don't ever think it really did feel like my home, because initially it was a feeling of this is still my grandparents' home, and then the feeling of this is my dad's home, it's not mine. But now I do have something that's mine. At that time, after the accident, I I did have a lot more feelings where I felt like a stranger in my own skin. Before the accident, I never felt like I was pretty. I never felt like I was good enough. I always felt like maybe my shoulders were too broad, my hips were too broad, I've got a little belly pouch, I've never been a skinny person, and then after my accident, I have 2 broken legs. I thought so poorly of myself that I initially felt that if I got my leg amputated, nobody would want me. No one would find me attractive. My disability would be ugly and off putting. But in those darkest times, where the thought that I would never be enough when I was disabled was actually the thing that made me realise my body is my home, and it has gotten me through so much, and I don't want to focus on the parts of myself that I don't like, but the parts that have got me through, that have got me to a point where I'm still standing or sitting. um, and I love every part of myself, and it doesn't sound like it's possible, and saying it out loud does kind of feel like I'm bragging in some kind of way, or making it sound more dramatic or for the reason of content. I don't know, but it is all the truth. I would have done anything previously, to the point where I wanted to just cut myself out of my own skin. I couldn't shower without feeling disgusted. I couldn't go to bed without wearing a bra. I basically slept with people with the lights off and my t-shirt on because I hated my body that much, and I was so scared that other people were going to hate me too. And that is a really negative cycle to turn into. That is why I ended up at a point where I confused sex with love, and I put myself in very unsafe situations and I got taken advantage of. And for a long time, there was a lot of shame of I put myself in those circumstances, but I didn't know any better at the time, and I didn't know that all of those experiences were it made me hate myself more were actually things that I needed to see to love myself. I wouldn't realise that getting my leg chopped off would be the thing where I go, do you know what? Fuck what anybody else's opinions are on my body because it's got me here. I'm healthy. I'm alive. I probably should have died from my accident, but I'm here. So if you see me and you don't like what I'm wearing and you think I'm too fat to be wearing an outfit, keep your fucking opinions to yourself, because if I'm wearing something, it's because I'm comfortable in it, and what you say doesn't really matter. And I didn't really know, I didn't know how reading these poems were going to go, and it was going to get this deep and all of these different things coming into it. So you've probably been noticing I don't have a very good flair for transitioning, so let's just go on to the next poem. That's a good transition. Poem 4. He was made of fire and I was made of ice. I came too close to his flame and he melted me with his embers, reducing me down to a puddle. With time, I froze over again, but I was never quite the same. A fragile, watery imitation of what once was. Where was my fear of fire when it came to you? And I picked this poem because of how I felt in a lot of previous relationships. And I did kind of think there about maybe moving on to the next one that I had, because I was like, oh, am I rambling on too much here? But it's a podcast, that's the whole point of it. If I couldn't ramble on, then I probably shouldn't be doing this. So I decided to keep this in because it is another image for being broken, having to rebuild in a different way, but being melted and frozen in a different form. And I do really think it is good imagery for how relationships can impact us as humans. And I don't just mean romantic relationships, because there are some friendships that I have had that have ended and they have hurt more than any romantic relationship that I've ever had to that point. But I have realised that in life there are a lot of things that will melt me and reshape me and freeze me into different forms. But that's life, really. I don't want to be scared of the fire. I want to feel the warmth while I can and know that however I change is meant to be for me. I know that life is going to have a lot of times where I feel broken down and I need to rebuild myself, but the difference between now versus where I maybe was 8 or 9 years ago when I first read this poem is that I have a really steady foundation, because I know who I am at my core and no one can really take that away from me. And knowing that, and especially believing that, is really special, because it means that I know that I can enter any kind of relationship and trust my intuition. And I really like the saying that sometimes it is for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. I will probably have said that a few times in previous episodes and it is ringing a bell. And there are seasons and reasons, and I am okay with them passing through and me feeling their warmth, even just for a little bit of time. But I also know when to walk away when the fire that they have is starting to impact me in a negative way. And I don't know. I just, it's been a lot of learning, and a lot of things do come up in poetry where it makes me think about some things that I would never have crossed my mind without reading it. And I think that's also a reason why I wanted to do this episode, because I talk a lot and I know there might be times where I repeat myself or I say something that I've already said but it's in a different kind of way. But kind of like what I said at the start of this episode, this podcast is basically like a verbal diary. However, I know what to put out there and I know what not to put out there because I'm cautious of the fact that things live on the internet forever. I don't want to be too messy, too chaotic, which is why taking a break when I don't feel up to it, because I know that I'm not in the right headspace, and I do feel like that's quite powerful. I don't know if that's like, oh, look at me being so powerful. I feel like such a oh, no, I'm going to need to bleep that because that's a YouTube no-no. Ooh, I feel like such a bitch. There, that's better. Wow, these transitions are getting worse. So, time for the fifth and final poem from The Princess Saves Herself in this one by Amanda Lovelace. It took losing him to finally find myself. It took losing him a second time to be sure of myself. That was my first act of self-love. I would thank you, but we both know you don't deserve it. This poem, reading it, does really make me think of one person in particular, and it wasn't just the second time of losing him, but maybe the fourth. But by that point, I had learned how things were going with this person, and I'm not sure if I lost him times before or if I pushed him away in an attempt to protect myself because of that feeling of intuition, but I always ignored it and I always went back, and I always felt like there was some kind of pull, some kind of attachment, that way where I'm like, oh, we're so connected. Trauma bonded, babe. Trauma bonded, not connected. But anyway, that relationship is one of the reasons why I trust my intuition so much now. It is one of the reasons why I'm so cautious when it comes to dating and letting people in, not because I am scared of love or commitment, but because I'm scared of feeling pain. I'm scared of someone lying to me and trying to deceive me to get into my good books. That I don't know, there are times where I think about and I think about reaching out, but I've said everything that needed to be said in a relationship, and there are definitely a few people that I have thanked for showing me that I deserved better, but I can be at peace knowing that I deserved better and I can do better for myself without him being in my life, without acknowledging him in the ways that I've changed, because I don't need to prove myself to anyone but myself. I said that was the last poem from Amanda Lovelace, but I actually have one more, and I actually think I just want to read this poem and not say any thoughts on it, because I think this is one that when I read it, write your thoughts in the comments and tell me what you think. Poem 6, Amanda Lovelace, down in the comments. If I ever have a daughter, the first thing I will teach her to love will be the word no. And I will not let her feel guilty for using it. No is short for fuck off. Like I said, I'm not going to go on too much because I have rambled a lot about Amanda Lovelace's poems. I have social media poetry. I have Madisen Kuhn's poetry, and then I've got my book. So yeah, I like the sentiment of that. No is short for fuck off, and it can be perceived as rude, but do you know what? Meh. I don't want anyone to feel like they have to put themselves in unsafe situations to feel loved and accepted, that they can say no, and the importance of respecting somebody else when they say no. But I hope you have enjoyed these poems. If you have, like I have said, This is from The Princess Saves Herself by Amanda Lovelace. If you've enjoyed these poems, then be sure to check them out. The formatting of how they are written will be on screen in this. So if you want to have a little bit of a swatch at that before you buy the book, you know it's on the screen. But anyway, other than books, I have moved on to a social media age like everyone else. And saying that makes me feel really old. Maybe I should have worded it in another way, but oh well, that was a good transition, so I'll take it. And then me bringing up the fact that I was doing the transition kinda ruins it, but you know what? I don't care. I could cut it out and pretend that it didn't happen, but I'm not going to do that. So, books were my go-to when I was putting together the pieces of childhood neglect and abuse, grieving the childhood that I didn't get to have because I had to grow up too quickly. But that changed slightly when I had my accident. I started to find concentration on anything really difficult, and that included books. I was always a big reader when I was a kid, and I realised that that was also a part of escapism because I'm really bad at visualising things now, but when I read books as a kid, I would stop reading a book and then I would be like, oh my god, what was that TV show or movie that I was watching? And I'm like, that was a book I was reading and the TV show movie was in my brain that I made up. So that's why I also really like reading books before seeing the movies, because I wanted to see what difference my interpretation and their interpretation. But now I don't really need that escapism, that I can't really get into books like that. That wasn't the reason at the time of the accident. That's a more recent conclusion that I've came to, that wasn't in my notes, but do you know what? Anyway, you've got it now. But at the time when I had my accident, I was doped up on meds. I couldn't concentrate. I had books bought for me because I was a big reader, and I felt like a failure in some kind of way, that I would read a few pages and I'd put it down and then I'd pick it up and I'd need to read those few pages again because I'd already forgot what they said. And reading poetry on social media on a screen was much easier. I found it a lot easier to go into. I love listening to poetry. I really want to go to like a poetry night. Me and my pal Felix tried to go to one, but we got to the wrong entrance and it wasn't accessible, and we'd already walked and I had to go back and get the car to pick them up, and then we had to go try and go to the accessible entrance, and then it was a bit more of a walk away than what we'd already done. So we just went and got some food and went back home because that didn't work out. But I'm really hoping to go to a poetry night because I love poetry, as you can kind of get from this episode. However, I am going to get onto the social media poetry. As I read these poems, I am going to have the poems on screen, like I said that I was doing for The Princess Saves Herself in this one. And I am also going to have credit for the people who wrote these poems, and I'll obviously kind of say it before I read the poems so that those of you who are listening on audio can also check out these lovely poets without having to come to the video, find where I'm talking about it and see the photos. So anyway, let's get right into it, show you some of the authors that I love from social media, and hopefully you love them too. The first poem is from Poetry of Diman. Sometimes you have to let go of the life you have planned for so that you can embrace the life that is waiting for you out there with all of your heart. Letting go is hard, but when you hold on to what you're supposed to let go of, it makes your life more difficult. It takes you away from all that you are worthy of. But every day you have a choice to choose only what matters to your heart, to not give up trying when things are hard, and to be hopeful and prepared for a better future. Let today be the beginning of that. And this was an account that I found on social media near the very beginning of my recovery, and that's why I chose this poem. I can't begin to explain, like I said earlier, how writing and poetry got me through some of the darkest times of my recovery. Poetry is a way that I feel seen, and it is almost like a comfort blanket that online I was shown the poems that I needed to see to help me grieve and be angry and accept that although this is really shitty, life does go on and there might be something better out there for me, that I'm not the only person that has ever felt like this. And at the beginning of the episode, I gave the same sentiment, as I hope that if anyone is listening and you have felt any of the feelings that I have discussed throughout this episode, you're valid, you're seen, and you're not the only person that has felt how you do. Sometimes knowing that is all that it takes to feel a little bit less alone. And at the time in my recovery, that's what I needed, because I had a lot of people around me, but when I got home, I went into COVID and I couldn't see a lot of people. And I did turn to poetry, I did turn to commentary YouTubers and watch things along with them, because it made me feel a bit It made me feel a bit less lonely. I would really encourage you to go to Poetry of Diamond and read some of their poems, as I feel like they are all very hard hitting, and I guess this is a place where I can showcase some other creators that have made an impact on me, a bit like what I did with my physical disability representation and kind of people that have been important in social media for me accepting my disability. The second poem I have from social media is from Stephanie Bennett Henry. I missed myself. There, I said it. It's been a long time coming, a journey that felt like a war I barely made it out of. Here I am, here I am. It means a lot more now. I worked so hard to let go of the parts of myself that were hurting, and I worked even harder on the healing. And here I am now. I found myself, laid down all that was never mine to carry, and refused to ever settle for less than everything I ever wanted. This is me. I never lost sight of my worth. I only took a detour into the deepest parts of myself and discovered there is nothing I can't do. I missed myself. It's been a long time coming, a journey that brought me back home to me. It was worth it. I was worth it. There is a bit of a theme that you might have noticed. I've already kind of said this through this episode, but these poems are a lot about grief, loneliness, love, recovery. They are poets that I found during my recovery, and like I said about the previous poem, I don't know how to describe the impact that poetry has had on me. And I think, no, I don't I don't know how to explain the way that words have had an impact on me, and I think people would usually see that as a negative thing, and there is definitely poems that I have written about harsh words that have been said to me that have stung like ice or cut me deep, but these are words that I don't know really how to describe it. This poem kind of sums up some of the things I talked about. Jesus, that took me a while to spit it out. That this poem that I've just read by Stephanie Bennett Henry kind of sums up the points that I was making in the poem about my body and my self-worth and never feeling at home in my body. Through all of the trauma of my accident, it brought me home to who I've been all along, and I just never realised. And that wasn't a process that happened overnight, but over years. And I guess I'm just happy to be sitting here today, because there's a lot of times where I could have truly lost myself. There's a lot of paths that I could have taken in life, which will always play on my mind. There will always be a thought of what if, but those what ifs could have led me further away from who I was meant to be instead of closer. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, and I feel like I deserve it. And I never thought that I could fully say that with my whole chest. The third poem I have picked is by Jenny Cecilia. I want a best friend to do the mundane with. Pick out fun, sparkling drinks at the grocery store, walk around the farmer's market and eat pastries. We exchange books and our favourite pumpkin recipes. Someone who appreciates a cosy night in, watching One Tree Hill or the Gilmore Girls for the 100th time. The kind of best friend you can do nothing with is a special friend to find. And I picked this poem of Jenny's as there is a lot of her poems that I resonate to, a lot that I would love to share with all of you, but I want you to go and pick them out and read them for yourself and see how you feel about them, and maybe even come back and tell me in the comments or send in an email to cripplecroniclespod@gmail.com. There is always a place to plug that if you are looking to tell me some of your favourite poems. If you've went on to Jenny's Insta, Stephanie Bennett Henry's The Poetry of Diman, if you read any of the books that I've mentioned today, I would love to hear about it, because I really enjoyed this short and sweet poem, and it did make me think of Eleanor, and it is a friendship that has made me realise how much I desire people to just do mundane things with. It is nice spending time with people, and I don't care what we do. It doesn't need to be fun or exciting, because realistically, it's the people that you go with that make things fun and exciting. It's knowing that, and knowing that it's a foundation of human life to have community and love and support, and that I'm not needy or annoying or pathetic or weird or any of those horrible things for wanting love and support and community and to have friends and to be surrounded by lovely people. That is life. That is how we have survived and thrived as humans, is having people around us, because we can't do it on our own. And I think the thing that always kind of rings a bell when I think about these things is the saying where it takes a village to raise a child, and that doesn't usually, like, I think before me being very literal, I took that as like literally a village of people, which in literal senses, yes, you do need a village of people, but they're your community. That's the point of it. It's not just random people, but oh, it's your neighbours that you can go next door and ask for some milk. It's your friends that when your baby's not able to sleep, you phone them and talk to them, because sometimes parenthood is fucking hard. It's having people that can look after your kids so you can spend time with your partner, because some people don't have that fucking luxury. It is acceptance that life is enjoyed with people around you, and also the idea that all of the people that I have in my life, they're just adding to the life that I have myself. I can have fun and enjoyment and excitement when I'm going out and I'm exploring things on my own, but I still take photos to share them with my friends. I'll still FaceTime Eleanor when I see a really beautiful view and say, it's just a quick one, I just wanted to share this with you, because I don't know, that's what I want in my friendships. I see something and I think of somebody and I pick it up for them, the same as my friends will see sunflowers or ginger cats or something and they'll send me it. And I think that is one of the purest things of friendships and relationships, is when someone sees something and they say, oh, I really thought about you, because being thought of is important. Like, being thought of and cared for and loved is such a massive thing, and a lot of people don't get to experience that. A lot of people have been brought up in ways where shame is drilled into you, and you are taught to feel like you're unlovable. But I want you to know that that's not true, that there are people that love you for the things that you do that you might not even realise. So if you have been brought up in a way where you have been conditioned to think horribly about yourself, I hope at some point you can see the good parts that other people can see in you, and you can look in the mirror and you can say, do you know what, fuck you, I am a good person. I did have another poem from Instagram, but I am going to actually skip past that today because I have rambled on a lot. I am quite far into recording. I had some poems picked out from one of my favourite poetry books, which is 18 Years by Madisen Kuhn. If you're watching this on YouTube, if it'll focus, you should be able to see this is a very well-loved book. It's not focusing in because of my face. Even when I'm trying to hide away, it's still trying to focus on, oh, there we go, is that kind of focused on it now? Who knows, that was a bit muffled. Anyway, I put some little stickies in this book, and I also took photos of them. That's where I've been reading this poetry off of, so that I wasn't having to flick through the books. However, I have been talking for quite a while, so this book is going to get put back on my desk for just now, and we are going to start with this one when I do another poetry episode. However, if you want to read some of Madisen's poetry, I would really encourage you to pick up this book. These aren't sponsored in any kind of way. I have never spoke to any of these authors that I'm kind of reading. This isn't an advertisement of any sort. This is just poetry that I really love and enjoy. So if you don't want to wait until the next time I do a poetry episode, this book is called 18 Years by Madisen Kuhn, and there are so many fabulous poems inside of it. So I'm going to put this to the side and I am going to get into my poetry. So this is my poetry book that I got a final version of in 2018. As you can see on the video, if I put it in front of my face, I have a lot of sticky tabs here, which is for another podcast episode, which when I do that, I might read the Madisen Kuhn poetry at the start of it because I have been yapping on for a while and I don't want to give myself too much editing work. It's not even because I don't think you'll listen to it, it's that I don't want to be sitting editing for 2 hours. So we're going to read some of my poetry, and yeah, this is Trauma, Heartbreak and Healing, and I am just going to flick through this and pick some poems and read them to you and maybe give you a bit of background on them. But first of all, I wanted to read the back of my book, which I kind of had to write a little blurb. I didn't really know what to write, so this was the back of my book. I am here, I am still breathing, still alive. Life is a series of ups and downs, twists and turns. Please be mindful, open your heart and learn to love again. And the very first page of my poetry book, as you can see, when I say I like to take notes, this is what I mean. Like, this is the autism. Even I'm not diagnosed, by the way, better put that out there. I'm self-diagnosed because the NHS is diabolical. However, if you can look at this and tell me I'm not autistic, then fine, go ahead. But who the fuck writes all of their trauma in a book and gifts it to their family for Christmas presents? Because I don't know, but I did. What I was going to say is, following on from the back of my book, on my first page, I didn't really have like a prelogue or an acknowledgements, which you usually see in poetry books. I just have, to my body, thank you for not giving up on me. And I wasn't initially going to read that in this episode because, I don't know, it just felt a bit like, it's just the first page, like, not that important. But all of the things that I've shared through this episode, it is actually kind of important because I've spoke about making my body a home and being able to come back to it, and I knew that in 2018 this was still a time where I was probably the most fucked up, and I was using sex and drugs and all kind of things to try and make myself feel full in any kind of way. And at that point I could still realise that I'm here because my body's got me through it and not gave up on me. So let's have a little flick, see what poem is coming up. So I'm going to give a trigger warning for abuse, maybe skip forward 5 minutes. This poem is called Engraved. I don't think I will forget the sound of flesh hitting flesh, the first strike of fist against jaw. I don't think I will forget the bloodstained walls, the bruises left on the skin that spent 9 months protecting me. I don't think I will forget the hinges being ripped from the wall. I don't think I will forget the threats of death, the fear of maybe waking up and no longer having a mother. These things have been engraved in my soul. I had to get out, and I'm sorry I left you behind. I hope it's over now. And writing this and putting it into this book was terrifying. That is one of the reasons, like I mentioned earlier, of why I had a website where I controlled who was being able to purchase this book and cancel an order if it was somebody that I didn't want to read it. It helped me for my abuse to feel real, and even now I'm still putting pieces together that my abuse was a worse experience than I gave myself credit for. There are so many blank parts in my brain because I had to protect myself, and I used to tell myself that the abuse I experienced wasn't valid because I wasn't hit, but I was scared that I wouldn't wake up. I was scared that I wouldn't have a mum. I was scared every single day, basically. And that's no life for a child. And I don't really think there's anything else I can say on that. So I'm going to pick another poem. Maybe I'll pick one from the healing section. Let's see. This is one that I like. A more positive poem after that one. Walking away. Your words always sting, leaving open wounds on my heart. I don't know what I have done to not deserve your love. However, I have come to accept that I need to walk away. Do not make an effort only when it pleases you. A mother is meant to do anything for her children. You turned your back and my heart broke with each step you took. I will fill this watering can with my own tears, and I will bloom and grow without your nourishing. I can't believe how long ago I wrote that poem, and at that time, those last words were not something that I believed. Those last words were a fake it till you make it. Going, like I said earlier on in this episode, I think there's a lot of things that people don't understand about children estranging from their parents, not having relationships with their parents, going no contact with their parents. However, I have experience, and people will tell me that life is too short, but I'm a living product of the fact that life is too short. I had a car accident, I nearly died, I lost my leg, and I knew at that moment that I couldn't have my mum in my life. I couldn't let her let me down again because I was more important at that moment. And that's something that I've carried through with me since my accident, that I love having people around me. I'm an introvert, but I'm a people person, but I'm not a people person for people that disrespect me. I'm not a people person for people that will try to silence me and try to shut me down, because abuse grows in silence. I was a child. I was not brave enough to speak up whenever this was going on. But I'm brave enough to speak up now, and I won't let anybody tell me to shut the fuck up, because I will speak about my experiences for however long I want, for whatever healing it gives me. And if you didn't want to be spoken about, maybe you shouldn't have done the things that you did. And in that, I feel like I'm still very respectful. I don't like to drop names of people. I don't like to come across in any bitchy, horrible kind of way. I just want to talk about my life experiences and how it's impacted me. And sometimes people come into play in that, and it is hard. It is one of those where sometimes I want to call them out and say, yeah, you're a shit person, but that's not my call to make. I decide if I'm a good person or not, and me being toxic on the internet and calling people out is not right. So it's not something that I would want to engage in. Anyway, I'm going to pick one final poem from this book, and then I'm going to wrap it up for today, because I'm nearly an hour recording, and wow, I've said a lot. I might end up crying when I'm editing this, but who knows. I think this is one of the most perfect poems to end the podcast on, and it is actually the last poem in my book. It is called Pour It Out. I set down the razor blade and picked up the fountain pen, attached the cannula to my veins. I spilled my words out onto the page, written in blood that courses around my body. I will do something good with the blood I was so used to see disappearing down the drain. I will write for myself to heal rather than destroy myself. And I think that puts it perfectly. I wrote for myself to heal. I speak out for myself to heal. I do this podcast to help myself heal. And I hope in that it also helps people along in their healing journeys. And I know that it might not, but I'm not in control of that. I'm in control of the things that I can do. And right now, I can do this, and I can make a difference in my little corner of the world, and that's something that's really important to me. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this week's episode, please like, subscribe, turn notifications on audio platforms. If you have some of your own poetry and you would like me to read it out in the next episode, drop me an email to crippledchroniclespod@gmail.com. If you have any poets that you love reading in book form on social media, drop them in the comments, send me an email, let me know about them. And yeah, I really hope that you have enjoyed this episode, although it has been a bit chaotic and wild, and I've just went off on so many tangents that I've actually ended up not doing all of the stuff that I wanted to do. But do you know what? That is the beauty of having a podcast that is my own, and being able to work within what I'm feeling. And right now I'm feeling like that's enough for today. So yeah, I hope that you have enjoyed listening to me ramble away for an hour of your time, and I will hopefully see you in the next episode. Please take care of yourself, and yeah, bye!